Internet, you are now listening to the FreeLunch podcast. This is your man, Premium Pete. Yeah, I'm calling from Brooklyn, and I'm letting you know that you're tuned right in. Don't go nowhere. The place to be is right here. Listen to the FreeLunch podcast. Cheers.
Yeah. Set the world on fire, take the block by storm, but I blow so cold, nigga, warm your hands in the hell where the fire burn blue when the wheels turn slow when the steel pierce your skin, but it ain't so soft. I was raised in the Ville, I'm prepared for a war, and my shield so thorough that I don't need a hammer, and the heat don't scare me, man. This Alabama in the summer like a hammer to a runner, you gon' feel me. Go ahead, call me Green Tea Billy, Free Willy in your mind at the same damn time. You don't even wanna reach for the ceiling high. Listen, man, I'm the truth, won't lie. That's why I tell you put your hand to the sky. We can live for the moment, screaming out omens like the roof on fire. Finna set the world on fire. Finna set the world on fire. Finna set the world on fire.
Welcome to FreeLunch Podcast, a member of the New South Movement Podcast Network. This is your boy Tight, one half of the FreeLunch Podcast duo. BG is running late, but we are not going to wait because we have a special guest for you all today. It is really a pleasure that our guest today has agreed to even be on this week's show. And just to give you all a brief introduction, she is the national president of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, who was initiated actually out of the Epsilon chapter of Michigan State University back in the 1966. An uncompromising commitment to service for nearly 50 years. Has a Bachelor's of Science degree in Mathematics Education from Michigan University, a Master's of Arts in Guidance Counseling from the University of Michigan, and her Doctor of Education in Administration and Supervision from the University of Michigan. She believes every person has a special gift and that should be shared in the world. And so we are honored to have Dr. Walker join us today. Madam President, how are you doing today?
I am wonderful, and let me just say I am both pleased, honored, and privileged that you thought enough of me to ask me to participate in this interview. So I'm excited. Thank you
absolutely.
So much. How are you today?
Doing wonderful, and just to give some context, I had the honor of meeting Dr. Walker through my beloved cousin, someone who I miss dearly. Someone that I think about frequently, who was also a beloved and really just cherished Delta Sigma Theta, her organization that she was a member of. And if it wasn't for my cousin Jackie Ellis, I would have never had the opportunity to meet Dr. Walker. So again, it was a pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you and an honor to have you on our show.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
We really wanted to reach out because obviously you're humble, but in my opinion, I think your story from not only just simply the role you play as the national president of Delta Sigma Theta, but also just when I started digging a little bit deeper into your background, is very inspirational. And we kind of use this platform for our audience to really hear other stories, perhaps stories that they never would have had an opportunity to hear if it wasn't for this platform. One reason I reached out was because of the position and the role you play as a national president, but also just wanting to share your journey as to how you got to that point.
Okay.
As I was doing my research, I learned that you are the only child. However, it was a journey.
I am an only child, but my parents had twin boys who were born about a year and a half before I was born. And unfortunately, in my mother's 8th, 9th month, she fell and went into labor and had twin boys who only lived about a day or two after their birth. And my parents were told that they would never, ever have any more children. And my parents, being the believers and the holders of faith that they are, they said, "Oh, no, you don't understand." And the doctors, again, were saying, "Well, no, we're sorry, but unfortunately," and my parents kept saying, "Oh, no, we will." And even though they had been given the diagnosis, I guess that's what I would say, a prognosis, they would never have any more children, I was conceived. And I was born, but when I was born, the doctors called the family in again and said, you know, you have a baby girl, but she too will unfortunately not reside, you know, live more than 2 or 3 days after birth, because my mother had been literally bedridden for most of her pregnancy while she was carrying me. And they too, again, as I said, with that faith step, said, oh, no, you don't understand. Because when I was born, I couldn't hear, I couldn't see. They said I would never walk. I would just be a vegetable. My brain would not develop. And all the negative things that you can imagine were told to my parents. And with their faith again, they were like, no, this is not going to happen. She will be fine. And so very early on, I was placed in a body cast after multiple surgeries. And again, I would talk about the years in a few minutes, but this was many, many years ago, before, as we talked about modern medicine. And I spent the first 2 years of my life literally in a body cast and looking out of a hospital window. And when I was finally discharged from the hospital, I was about maybe 2 or 3 years old, and my parents were fortunate enough for me to begin taking piano lessons. And the purpose of the piano lessons was so I could develop movement, not only in my hands, but in my upper arms as well. I started taking dance lessons when I was 3 so that it would strengthen my leg muscles because they said, again, I would not be able to walk. In terms of my sight, I started wearing glasses at a very early age, and I don't mean just glasses. They were deep, heavily prescribed glasses. I mean, not trying to endorse anybody, but as we would say in those days, they were glasses that looked like Coca-Cola bottles.
Coke bottles.
And I wouldn't be able to hear. All you can imagine, everything negative. Well, here I am, quite a few years later, and I can hear very well. My sight, I do wear glasses. I do wear contacts. I've been wearing contacts for many, many years. And I wear, in terms of glasses, I wear readers because as you get a little older, sometimes you need a little bit more assistance. I do play the piano, not as well as I once did, and that's because I really had a affinity for dancing more so than I did piano. So I took the dance lessons, and I have danced from birth literally until now in terms of tap, ballet, jazz, modern, liturgical dance, and I still dance. Now, I say all of that, not only did I earn my bachelor's and my master's, but I earned my doctorate for someone who was told she would never, ever develop. I say all that because March 4th, I'll celebrate a birthday, and I am proud to say I'll be 69 years old. So,
amazing.
So to whom God has given all of this, that's why I'm a fighter. And I'm a fighter to this very day in terms of I never let anybody determine my destiny. So that's where my motto, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. That had it not been for my parents and their belief, I don't know where I would be. My mother, who is very, very active, very feisty, she's a young 95-year-old who will be 96 in March. My father passed some years ago at the age of 90. So had he lived, he would be celebrating his 99th birthday this year. So longevity is on my side. So that's my story in terms of from birth to where I am today, that no, it has not been an easy journey, but it has been a journey, and I am so thankful and blessed for all the destinations I've been able to reach.
Dr. Walter, the voice you heard is the addition of our co-host, BG, who has joined us. BG, would you like to greet Madam President?
Good afternoon, Dr. Walker. I apologize for being late. I try to mix this in with a real 9 to 5.
I do understand. Thank you so much again for the invitation.
No,
I'm very honored and humbled by it, so I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for taking time out and just talking to two little country guys from Alabama. I appreciate it.
So I was with, and you told us a lot, and I read and I heard you say that yellow was one of your favorite colors,
Yes.
and the butterfly was one of
Yes.
your favorite creatures, what have you.
As I said, I spent the first 2.5 years of my life in a body cast in a hospital. And all I could do was just lay there and look out the window. And, you know, I was born and raised in Detroit, and sometimes the weather and the climate didn't always allow the sun to shine as it does here in Florida. But I would always look out, and I would look towards the sun. And I kept thinking, if I could just get to the sun. And the sun was yellow. That's why it's my favorite color. The butterfly, because I kept thinking, if I ever get out of this body cast, which in my mind was a cocoon, this butterfly was going to fly. And fly as high as she could, as long as she could, and as far as she could. So that's why the butterfly for me is so significant, and the color yellow.
If you look at it, that's what, the 1940s or
Yes.
and so can you share with our audience, because the majority of our audience is millennium, and I'm sure they can't even imagine what a hospital was like, or what I mean, the far as they may go back is, I mean, from probably imagination, they probably can't even imagine what a hospital or what type of equipment was being used.
Okay. So when we think in terms of over 60 years ago, hospitals in those days were very sterile. They were very storied. They had only the essential equipment there. But you also have to keep in mind that I was a black child born into what was truly considered mainstream America. And so for a black young lady to be born, I was third generation college. That in itself was unheard of, because black people didn't go to college. So my parents were able to, again, communicate with the medical staff that not only their belief, but they were able to ask the kinds of questions they were able to ask. And so I was able to have what we would probably consider today miracle kind of medical attention. The fact that they were able to fly in specialists who had not ever dealt with cases similar to mine. It was not uncommon that if you were born, especially in those days, under the circumstances I was born, that those babies didn't live. Today we put them in incubators. We have all kinds of life-saving support systems. Those things did not exist. We didn't have, for example, even when I give blood today, they use those little, I call them the little needles, like they call them butterfly. In those days, they didn't even have medical or pediatric kinds of needles. So everything that was used for me were used like they would if they were dealing with an adult. Luckily and thankfully, I don't remember the pain. I really don't. But I can only imagine my parents walking into this room, seeing this baby who could not defend herself, being hooked up to all these machines and tubes and things that just did not exist, that we take so much for granted for. So to the millennials, I definitely would say, look how far we've come. Look how far we still have yet to go. But the fact that, and I have to say this, that God picked me to be the one who will be able to survive. And thankfully, again, I don't remember the journey. I just in terms of those early years, but I can just imagine what it was like for my parents to walk into this hospital, and a hospital again that supposedly was integrated. But can you imagine how many black babies there were in that hospital in March of 1948, or even in December of 1948 when I was still in the hospital?
Did that delay the start of your elementary education?
It really didn't. My mother was, like I said, I'm still very much alive, but she was an educator. So they did an awful lot of what we now would call homeschooling. But I started school, like everybody else, in kindergarten. I walked with a limp. It did not delay my achievement because I was physically affected, not mentally or emotionally or educationally. In fact, all while I was in the hospital, my mother and father continuously read to me. So even though I was too young to read or too feeble at that point to even hold a book, they made sure from a very early age that I understood the importance of education. So nothing in my life was delayed. In fact, I don't even tell people this. In those days, we did what we would call double promoted. I skipped the third grade.
Oh, wow.
Because they said this child is just much further along than what we had ever anticipated. So I went from the second through the fourth grade and never missed a beat.
Sound familiar, BG?
Yeah, it does sound a little familiar. I ain't do the third, but I did the first. But Delta Sigma Theta, they got one. I'm listening to Dr. Walker, and I'm over here getting amped. So I can only imagine what the membership is like to have someone with that energy and that testimony at the head of the organization. Shout out to Delta Sigma Theta. But Dr. Walker, this part about your parents and the strength that they had to show, seeing their young infant going through what you had to go through. And our parents are like our first teachers, right? So considering all those things, what would you say was kind of like the biggest thing that you drew from your parents that you still lean on today?
It's my belief in God and my faith and probably the mantra that I can do anything through God because all things are possible. And I learned that at a very early age that no one can stop you unless you allow yourself to be stopped. And so I have learned that when people tell me no, I just look at them and I think, you have no idea. Your no to me has just been a yes with an exclamation point. And that's how I move forward. So I'm always challenging, and the members of our organization will tell you, I challenge all the time. And I do understand that we have to strategically plan how we do things, when we do them, even though mentally we might say, we're just going to forge ahead. Sometimes, you can't just forge ahead. Sometimes you have to just stop and think about it. So, there's a phrase, maybe not a phrase, but a little bit of anecdote that I say all the time is that I never tell my God about my mountains and how big they are. I always tell my mountains how big my God is.
Question: growing up in Detroit, I believe, what was it like in Detroit?
I grew up in a neighborhood where we were the first black family in that neighborhood. And so I didn't know that segregation and isolation exist. I didn't know that. I didn't know that my parents were going through what they were going through by living in that neighborhood. But there's a story that I want to share. I was about maybe 4 or 5 years old and growing up in the neighborhood, and there was a young child about my age who lived next door to me. She was white, and we would play together all the time. And one day I came home, and my aunt, who was visiting, was there with my parents. And I came home. I was so excited, and I said, I got a new name. And they said, a new name? I said, oh, yes. And I'm not going to give my neighbor's name, but they said, well, what is it? I said, she just gave me a new name, and I was so excited. I said, what is it? I said, it's Niggum. They said, Niggum. And the room got very silent. And I didn't understand that. I thought it was, an honor and a pleasure that she had given me this nickname. My mother took me, and my aunt went with us next door to the neighbor's house and said, excuse me, it has been brought to our attention that your daughter just gave our daughter a nickname. And the mother looked kind of surprised, and they said, well, what is it? And she said, Niggum. Now, literally, I know now what that meant. And I learned at that day that children only parrot that which they have been taught. That little girl knew nothing about the phrase that literally, what she had said to me, and I think I can say it on the air, that she was calling me nigger. She didn't know how to say it because she was young, and I don't think her parents expected her to repeat it, nor did they expect my parents to bring that to their attention. And as I said, I learned very early then that people can put a name on you, but you don't necessarily have to respond to that name. So again, it goes back to nobody can make you feel inferior without your consent. And so I grew up in Detroit, in a neighborhood that was a very flourishing neighborhood. Many times I found myself the first and the only black child attending certain schools, going to certain events, participating in certain activities. Even the high school that I went to, which was a gifted high school, I thought that there were many, many black children there. I didn't realize that in my class at that time was considered a large graduating class. My graduating class had about a little over 300 students, and less than 30 of us were black. I did not realize that until the time. I went to Michigan State. I started in 1965, graduated in 69. There were 40,000 students there. I could go across campus, 2 or 3 days and never see a black person other than, any personal contact that I made. We would get together, party on the weekends, and we laughed to this day that we thought there were a lot of us. There were less than 400 black students on Michigan State's campus at that time. But we didn't know that. So we developed our own sense of family, of kindred spirits. So, again, I think in terms of my upbringing and coming up in Detroit, and I am still I call myself very much a proud Detroiter. Even though I've lived in Florida since 1990, I go back to Detroit 6-7 times a year. Mm-hmm. My father's deceased, but my mother still lives in the same house that she resided in when my parents moved in 1969. It is a strong, viable neighborhood. There's a park there. There's a church across the park, and the neighbors are still very close. So even though I know sometimes the picture of Detroit is bleak and doomed, that is not the Detroit that I grew up in, nor the Detroit that I am even familiar with when I go back home.
Well, the music scene at that time.
I tell people, growing up with the Temptations and the Supremes, I saw them all the time. Didn't realize that they were superstars, even though I saw them. There was an event that we would all go to, and it was called the Motown Review. I think we paid like 25 cents or 50 cents the first time I ever saw Stevie Wonder in person. Other than the fact, when I say in person performing, because, see, he was a blind student at the Lansing School for the Blind, and I was there at Michigan State, and we would tutor, didn't realize it was Stevie Wonder that we were tutoring.
Really?
I grew up.
Are you really?
Yeah, grew up in a neighborhood. Barry Gordy lived down the street. It was a neighborhood, and it was a growing, viable, just a wonderful atmosphere. And I don't say that to try to make it be better than what it was, but that's the Detroit that I know, I'm familiar with, and the Detroit that is still alive today in many, many parts of it. Are there some parts of it that are bleak and homes are falling down and all of that? Yes, there is. But I think you'll find that in any major urban area. But that's the neighborhood that I'm familiar with.
BG, did you grow up knowing anyone from Selma like that?
Tutoring Stevie Wonder and not know it? No, I ain't never been. I never been fortunate enough to do that.
At that time, he was a young blind child that we were reading to.
He was little
Did
Stevie.
not realize that this would become, as they say, the Stevie Wonder. I graduated from, the school I graduated from is Cass Technical High School. There were 2 schools there. There was Cass Tech and Commerce. And the Supremes went to Cass Tech and Commerce. So that's who I grew up with. I could walk around the corner. I could see Anita Baker. It was just, I didn't realize I was, as they say, hanging out with the in crowd. Didn't even know it.
Didn't even know it. You went to Michigan State in 65. How in touch were you all with what was happening in regards to the civil rights movement and what was happening in the South? We
were very much in touch. And let me just share again stories. We had our first black professor, was Dr. Robert Green. And I can remember him coming to campus, and we were all excited because he was the first black professor. But what we soon found out was even though they meaning the administration, had hired him and invited him to Michigan State, he could not live in East Lansing, Michigan, because black people could not own property in East Lansing. And so the activists that I am, we protested and said if he cannot live in East Lansing, we cannot attend school there. Similarly, when Dr. King was assassinated, we literally shut the university down by going to the administration building and sitting on the steps. So we were very much a part of that civil rights movement. When they had the riots in Detroit, I had come home and was very much a part of that. I can remember growing up on Virginia Park and the National Guard riding down our street in their tanks, the military there with their guns pulled. So very much a part of the civil rights movement. And that's probably why to this day I am still a fighter and believe that nobody can make me feel inferior again without my consent.
400 students
400
out of
black people on a campus like Michigan State where there were over 40,000 students.
What would you say was the common thread between those 400? Because to me, that would signal that there was something about that group that might have been different from, say, the masses.
We all recognized, if nothing else, that we looked alike, and that as a result of being and let me use the term minority in terms of numbers, not minority in terms of anything else, that we planned together, and I think about Greek organizations. All the Greek organizations would come together, plan what their activities were for that week, for that year, and the non-Greeks as well. We had a close community, so much close that we started, and I was not one of the originators, but I'm a strong supporter of the Black Alumni Association at Michigan State. And I say that because it was unusual to have on a predominantly white campus a strong critical mass of black students who stayed together, and to this day. And we started the Black Alumni Association. We had persons in there who believed in endowments, and so we started scholarship funds to support those black students who would come behind us. And part of my story is I was a math major at Michigan State. In fact, at that time when I was there were no other black students, male or female, in the College of Natural Sciences. So I was the only math person that was there. So when we look at and think about the movie Hidden Figures, my friends teased me because we went to see it. They said I was sitting, and I didn't even realize I did this. They said I was sitting on the edge of my seat. And there's a scene in the movie where, she's figuring out the equation as to whether John Green can get up in space or not. And they said I kept sitting there saying, that's the wrong equation. That's the wrong equation. And when she went to, go find in her book what the right equation was, when she wrote it out, I literally said, that's it. It's all good now. And I sat back in my seat. I didn't even realize I did that, but they told me that. And I said, I remembered as a math major and a physics minor at Michigan State that walking into my first physics class and it was a lecture hall, about maybe 200, 250 students, all white males. And I walked in there, and the professor looked at me, and he said, may I help you? And I said, oh, no, I'm fine. And I went to find a seat. He said, may I help you? And I repeated, no, I'm fine. He said, well, are you in the right class? I said, yes, is this Physics 101? And I gave the section number and all that. He said, oh, you're probably misplaced. The home ec department is across campus.
Wow.
And I looked at him and said, you might be misplaced. I'm at the right place.
There you go.
And I sat down. And to this day, there were 4 other white males, again, whose names I will not share, that we are very, very close to this day because even though we had that lecture, when it was time for us to go to lab and, we did group work, and it was expected that you would have teams, all this, these 4 young men who were considered probably nerds and myself, nobody ever picked us for to be on their team. So we formed our own team, and we decided we were going to set the curve on every single test. And we did that. Now, all of a sudden, all the other students, well, can you join our team? No. I'm on the team I want to be on.
Right.
So I know what it's like to be the only one, and only sometimes it's female, only sometimes it's black. But when only means black and female, I tell everybody, you can't tell me no. I don't understand no. I understand a question mark, but I also understand if Muhammad won't come to the mountain will come to Muhammad, however that goes. So I'm a fighter. Always have been.
When did you get introduced to Delta Sigma Theta? And
I had always been familiar with Greek life. As I said, I was 3rd generation college. So I came from a family that was already Greek. My mother, who I love dearly, and I won't tell all the story, but my mother is 90, like I said, will be 96, a very, very active member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority. So I went to Michigan State with the intention of becoming a member of AKA. And in those days and time, we would go to all the Greek organizations, and I am so supportive of all the Greek organizations, and they were very supportive of me. But when I was on that campus and I looked at what was being done at that time, I made the decision that if Delta Sigma Theta would accept me, I wanted to become a member of Delta, and I did. And I can remember my mother saying to me, are you sure this is what you want? Because, once you make that decision, that's it. And I said, this is what I want. And I'm probably going to use some language that I shouldn't, but I'm going to say it anyway. My mother said to me, then be the best damn Delta you know how to be. Right. And that's what I've tried to do. And she and my grandparents and my as I said, I was the only child, and my father were very, very supportive of me. But I believe that it doesn't matter what colors you wear, whether it's red and white, pink and green, blue and gold, blue and white, doesn't matter. What's important is what do you do with those colors?
What was it about it, Dr. Walker, that made you feel like you wanted to be a part of Delta Sigma Theta?
At that day and time, and on that campus, I looked at what the Deltas were doing as it related to giving back to the communities. As I said, it was at Michigan State. It was East Lansing. There was still racism and segregation going on, and the young ladies that I knew who were on that campus were fighters. We all had collegiate advisors. My collegiate advisor was Hortense Golden Kennedy, who became one of our past presidents of Delta. So I looked at her. I looked at what her family was doing. I looked at what black people in the East Lansing area were doing, and I said, I want to do that. I want to be a fighter. I want to be one who is for civil rights. I want to be one who's for all lives matter. And that's what I was taught, and that's what I still believe in to today.
Did you have the desire to be the national president at that stage? Or at that?
I really didn't. I just wanted to be a good Delta. And it's funny because those who were around me at that time, they all say, and to this day, they say, we knew you were going to be. I said, but why me? There was always something about you, because I've been a questioner all my life. I would always, whenever people would say no, I'd say, why not? I've always been an analytical thinker. I don't think that I planned to become the president. I always just wanted to be a good member. And I would always have members of our organization who come to me and say, have you thought about? I think even about the fact that when I graduated from Michigan State and moved back home to Detroit, I became a member of Detroit alumni. And I remarried. I got married, and then later in life, I remarried, and my husband and I moved to Florida. That was in 1990. Mm-hmm. In 1994, the chapter here asked me if I would become their president. Now, again, that's unusual. I'd only been in the South 4 years. Mm-hmm. They had asked me really 2 years earlier, but my husband had become ill, and was later diagnosed with cancer and terminal. And I said to them, my commitment is to my husband. So not long after he passed, that's when they asked me to become the president. And then 4 years later, in 1998, I found myself campaigning as a regional director. So here it is again, the girl from the north coming to the south. In 1999, I was elected the Southern Regional Director. Unheard of. But I'm so thankful to my sorors who always saw something in me that I never saw in myself. I consider myself to be one who can bring people together. I can mobilize folks, but I never saw the leadership that they saw in me. So I'm always very thankful and very blessed that they were able to see that in me. So again, to answer your question, maybe I did in my mind, subconsciously, maybe this is what I planned. I remember going to a convention and saying, ooh, I want to be like her. The year that I became the president of my collegiate chapter back at Michigan State is when Frankie Freeman, who was our 14th national president, but one who was noted for civil rights, who just celebrated her 100th birthday. She and I talk, if not every week, every other week. I'm always telling her, I used to look at her and say, I want to be just like her. And to this day, I've tried to model my behavior, not just for Frankie Freeman, but for all of the past presidents who have been so supportive of the things that I have done. Sometimes I can be that quiet storm. Sometimes I'm not so quiet, I'll be honest. But one thing I tell people is that I'm a storm.
Ain't nothing wrong with that.
Ain't nothing wrong with it. When I was reading your bio and learning about you, you've also co-authored a book.
Yes.
And the name of that book is We Can Have Better Urban Schools.
Yes. I did a presentation many, many years ago. And in doing the presentation, there was this young man, a young professor, who came up to me afterwards and said, have you ever thought about writing? And I had done a couple of articles, and I said, yeah, but nothing since. He said, you have a story to tell in terms of education and understanding what it takes for young black learners. And I would look at him and say, yeah, okay, right. And he said, no, I'm serious. Let's think about writing together. So Cornell and I joined forces, and we started writing some articles about black learners, and particularly black learners in urban schools. And that was the beginning of the development of our books. And it is We Can Have Better Urban Schools. And in that, we talk about the challenges that black learners have. We talk about being parents in school systems that sometimes do not have policies or procedures that are meant for the improvement or the enhancement of black learners. We talk about the difference between quote-unquote mainstream learners and black students. We talk about code switching, and we all code switch. And I'll give you an example. On Sundays, when most of us go to black churches and we have what we call call and response, you know, the preacher is giving his or her word. And it's not uncommon in the black church that we speak out. And we'll say, speak all right on whatever we say. And that's how we communicate. And many times pastors will tell you, if I don't hear from you, I don't know if I'm doing a good job. That's on Sunday. Then on Monday, those same students are expected to walk into this sterile environment and raise their hand to be recognized. That's a disconnect. And if young black children don't understand that that's code switching, that's not saying that something that you do in your home life or in your church life or in your community life is wrong. It's just saying they're different arenas, and we all code switch. I just met with a group of fifth graders this week, in fact, and I was telling them the same thing about code switching, that on their way to school, they might use some language and have some behavior that many of us would say, I don't know what these young people are doing. But then when they get in school, they're expected to do a different kind of behavior. If you don't teach children how to do that, they will then come in school, exhibit that same behavior. The school has a set of rules that they don't have, they're not familiar with, and then we find them in special ed programs, in programs designed for children who have behavior disorders. They don't have any of that. They've not been taught that in different environments you might exhibit or you should exhibit different behavior. In a given day, as a black person in this country, we code switch all the time.
You know, as a common person, I oftentimes feel like there are certain aspects of schooling that is like failing, you know, the generations now and likely to kind of hinder future generations. What can we do based off of your experience to hold like school systems and all that more accountable as far as educating the youth?
I think there are several things we can do. Let's say helping children in terms of understanding their role and how they need to alter their behavior in different environments. But I also think in schools, we need to help them understand there are some cultural differences. And if you are to be a successful teacher in a given environment, you need to understand the cultural nuances of each of those children. For example, children of Asian descent, you know, we're always told, look me in the eye and tell me what you think. Children of Asian descent are taught not to look people in the eye. So if I don't sit there and look you in the eye and you don't understand that as my educator, you think I'm being defiant, as opposed to understanding who are the children that come to you? What makes your room so special and a safe haven for them? So they understand we're all here for one purpose, and that is for the purpose of educating. We talk about STEM. I told you I'm a math person, and I've been dealing with numbers all my life, and my members tease me. They always expect me to do something with numbers anytime I'm giving a speech, and I always do, because I don't see things from a language arts perspective. I look at things, I'm forever counting, always looking at, there are three people there, the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost. There's 7 plants on the stage. Okay, that's completion. I see things in numbers, but I help children to understand. And the work that I do with educators, help them to understand that as an educator, your role is to not be an educator or to teach. Your role is to help facilitate learning. There's a big difference. You teach dogs how to do tricks. You teach children how to want to learn. There's a difference between the two.
Dr. Walker, as we approach the ending of our time, because I want to be mindful, what's next for Dr. Walker?
Well, let me say this. It is funny that you asked me that, because today I think I had an epiphany. I had said that when my term is over, I just wanted to get my life back, get my house back, do those things that we normally just want to do, and just sit down and be a good past national president of Delta. But looking at the state of where we are in this country, the activist in me has come back, and I am bound and determined to help all of us understand that each of us is here for a purpose. As one of our members, Shirley Chisholm, said, service is the rent we pay for being on this earth and for not being a silent voice. And to help each and every individual understand, if it were not for the grace of God, none of us would be here. So when you say what's next for me, looking at longevity being on both sides, I'm being a long time. So I give the story. I tell you I always give stories. If you ever see a fight between a delta and a bear, you better pray for the bear. And so that's what I'm going to say. People better start praying for the bears.
I'm going to tell you this, Dr. Walker. You know, I have a lot of friends that are deltas, and, you know, we always are communicating on social media and having these conversations about social issues and things like that. That what you just said is trickling down, because those are the ones that I can pretty much count on to be in tune to what's going on and out there acting on it. So,
keyword for me is strategically plan how to make sure that those who don't have voices get heard.
Right.
And sometimes you have to listen to what people don't say as opposed to what they say, and watch their actions, and not always listen to their words. So I've been following a lot of things that have been happening in this country recently, and I see the time again for the voiceless to have a voice, And as I said, and for me, I think it started out when I was such a young child and, couldn't turn over, couldn't do all those things. That had it not been for somebody helping me, I don't know where I would be to this day. So you ask again, where does a Paulette Walker go? I now will become, again, the voice for the voiceless and help those who can't turn themselves over learn how to not only turn over, stand up, and fight for your rights.
BG, I'm telling you, boy, I'm ready to march. I'm ready.
I need to do something too, man. That's inspirational right there.
It is inspirational.
Delta Sigma Theta got one.
Absolutely. But right before we let you go, what would you say to the young person that's listening to this show to inspire them and joining the organization or any organization?
Yeah, I would say to any young person who is thinking about joining, as you said, any organization, do your homework. Find out where did this organization start. Find out are their principles, their values commensurate with yours. And if they are, then do what you need to do to join that organization. And when I say do what you need to do, I once had a young lady say to me, I'll do anything to become a Delta. I said, that's the very reason you'll never become one. Because if you tell me you will do anything, it means you have no limits and you have no parameters. So when I say do anything, I mean do it within the guidelines of that organization's, in terms of Greek organizations, membership intake program. I think my advice, and I have 12 grandchildren who I hope will also understand, you need to know your history. Because if you don't, you will allow history to repeat itself. I have a great belief in those of the Jewish faith who have never, ever let us forget the Holocaust. Unfortunately, sometimes we of the African diaspora have forgotten to share slavery and the history of slavery with our children as if it is something to be ashamed of. If they don't understand the history of where we are, they will allow it to repeat itself. Many times you hear about ISIS and how we should fear ISIS. If you were black and you grew up in these United States, you lived through ISIS when you lived through the KKK and the hangings. What's the difference? So when I say fight doesn't mean fist fight.
Physical
fight
fight no.
means you mentally outthink those who try to do everything they can to suppress and depress you. And I don't allow anybody to do that to me.
It's chess, not checkers, BG. Ain't that what you say?
All the time. Being strategic and outthinking the opponent. Gotta do
right.
it.
Always.
BG, you have anything else before we let Dr. Walker go?
Man, I'm full. Like they say after a good church service, I'm full right now. I'm so full.
Again, I want to thank both of you for just giving me this opportunity to share my story, to help others understand that we live in very different times, but different does not mean deficient. Different is just that. It's different. And what can and should we do to ensure that each person that is here has an opportunity to not only have access, but to succeed? Because access can mean a lot of things, but the opportunity to succeed is very different. So I look forward to the millennials. Yes, there are times when I'm critical. I'm going to be honest. That's what old people do. We get critical. But I am so impressed by their wanting to do. But sometimes they just don't understand the historical perspective, and they don't put things in proper context. And that's what we have to do. And we have to learn that the best way to help get rid of those who don't think like us in terms of where our values are is called the power of the vote. And use it.
Dr. Walker, thank you.
I hope I've added to your program. I look forward to, if anybody wants to get in contact with me so we can have further conversations, I look forward to that.
Yes, ma'am.
With that, I would just say, have a good rest of the evening.
Yes, ma'am. Right. You have a wonderful evening, and thank you again.
Thank you so much, both of you. Have a good evening now.
Right,
Bye-bye.
BG.
Ready to go sit out a hop?
Hey.
Ready to go sit out a hop?
That was
run through the wall.
I mean, when you start meeting and you get in rooms with people like Dr. Walker, I mean, the energy, the motivation, just the inspiration, it illuminates, and you can, and it's very obvious why she was chosen as the national president.
At that fine, but like I said, man, it's amazing because to see the trickle down from a leader to the people that make up an organization. Because like I said, man, you feel that same fire from a lot of the members that you encounter especially when it comes down to being out in the community and doing things, and that whole pray for the bear thing. Like they really do take that on and live by that. So it's nice to see how a person's energy can ignite a whole, group of people to be on kind of this one accord.
That's an old Muhammad Ali quote, right? I know Kobe used it, huh?
It's bad.
But when you got the Deltas using it, boy.
There's a bunch of them. Look out.
When you got the Delta using it, then you know something up. But Dr. Walker, man, you got to just say thank you for joining the show. And but BG, are you becoming the Bobby Brown, the FreeLunch podcast, BG?
Pretty much. The only thing is now I got to come in this thing with my shirt off. I got to let y'all know the BG and the FreeLunch podcast.
Man, I got Dr. Walker on the phone. I can't wait on you to join it. We got to go.
Yeah, man, you did right. You can handle it.
The show must go on, and I'm sitting here like, where the co-host? I
had to go put my swag on.
Okay.
No, man, I apologize.
Man, that was good. So, how can the people reach us, BGs?
Man, they can reach us at www.newsouthnet.com. Home website for the New South movement and everything we got cooking. FreeLunch podcast, Retroscope, D1, Communal Expression, Fearless Mystic. You know what, man? We got something for everybody. Ain't no excuses of why you can't rock with us, because we got something for you.
Who joining? Who gonna get Dr. Walker next? Somebody.
Yeah, you're probably gonna see a MSNBC or BT or somebody, but you gonna know that you heard her right here first, getting that real.
It never failed. It never failed. She was over there tooting little Stevie. Did you know that?
And didn't even, no, she didn't either. That's crazy.
She said she go right around the corner and Anita Baker house. That was
Diana Ross.
She say Gordy live right down the street.
Yeah, they say that though, man. That was like a real community, and if you were there, you could just see them just randomly doing stuff.
Man, so, I think we got some gems out of it. I think we got some gems out of that one, because you go into these interviews knowing that you gotta start, but not knowing what's gonna be revealed. And she tells so many good stories that it's amazing. So thank you, Dr. Walker. I am your boy Tight, one half of the FreeLunch podcast duo.
BG the 27 kid.
We out of here.
Set the world on fire. 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 Set the world on fire.